Hello. Well, I'm joined today by a very, I don't want to say old friend because you're not old, but a friend of mine that I've known for a long time, Edward Foster. How are you, Edward?
I'm all right. You,
All
Paul?
right. Yeah, I'm very good. I'm very good. So, we're going to talk a little bit about music today, but before we do that, could we give some of my listeners a little bit of an introduction to you, and what sort of work you're involved in and what you do, and please include all your musical activities as well for us.
Right. Okay. Well, I suppose you could say I'm an artist. Well, I am. That's my profession: painting, drawing. But also, I'm a musician as well, and and a writer too. So those are my passions and my work in a nutshell.
Yeah. And where can
So
people find your work? You have a website, if you could mention that.
yeah, sure. So my website is
Yeah.
edwardfosterart.co.uk, and you can see all my artwork on there. Also, lots of my music and stuff about my writings. So there's a lot of stuff there,
Right.
basically.
Lovely. Great. So we share a lot of similar kind of loves of music, I think. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about some of your maybe earliest musical experiences you can remember, maybe with your family and when music really started to have a kind of a profound impact on you. Can you think of is there any strong early memories of that?
Well, not specific ones that I can think of at this precise moment. I'm sure
Hmm.
things might filter in as we talk about
Right,
it,
well, do mention it if it comes to you.
but music was essential to my childhood because there was music on all the time in the house.
Hmm.
So my father was a great lover of classical music, and so his vinyl collection was massive. So we
Yeah,
would
see.
have we'd have that on all the time. So I'd have the be Wagner on in the background or something like that, or
Okay, yeah.
Schubert or something. I didn't fully know what it was when I was very young. So it was, you know, took a while for it to filter through what actually this music is.
It
But
was kind
it
of
made,
on in the background at all, quite a lot of the day then, would you say, when you were
yeah,
growing up? Yeah.
and also my dad sang all the time. So he would, be in the kitchen washing up or making breakfast for us all, and all I could hear was him singing constantly. So
Constantly.
he would sing songs from the musicals and
Right,
things like that,
okay.
like My Fair Lady and all sorts of stuff like that. And also he would have Radio Free on. So I remember as a child waking up in the morning and I would hear my dad singing or with Radio Free on. And then my brother, who was 4 years older than me, was really into music as well. And he would listen to, sort of music of the 80s, but interesting stuff like Echo and the Bunnymen or the Smiths or
Right,
Happy
okay.
Mondays and The Fall and Kraftwerk and stuff
Oh,
like that.
right,
So
wow, okay. Yeah.
I'd have this explosion of stuff hitting me when I was like 10 or 9, 8, something like that. And
Right, okay,
um,
yeah.
so music was always in the house and it was seen as just part of life. It
Mm.
wasn't something else. It was life.
Yeah, yeah. And so did your dad have was Schubert like one of his favorites, and was there certain things you'd be like, oh, here it is again, I can hear this piece, he really adores this music.
Well, he'd listened to a lot of music, so it was varied. I do remember Wagner. I think that might, I don't know. I had Wagner going on with Kraftwerk, so you had this strange German mix going on there.
Then I remember because I've looked through your dad's record collection. There'd be things like Sibelius, weren't there, and Elgar,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all those kind of.
He loved the English. He loved the English stuff, early 20th century stuff as well. He adored that. Also, string quartets. A lot of string quartet
Right,
music.
okay.
That's a love of mine. I love string quartet
Yeah,
music.
I think it's one of
Um,
the profound idioms to to listen to. It's
mm,
beautiful, isn't it? And the late Beethoven string quartets are just
yes, yeah, they're incredible, and I love the Haydn ones as well.
oh
I
yeah.
love those. I mean, he's the father of it, isn't he?
He is, yeah, yeah, Papa
That's one
Haydn.
good effect. Yeah, yeah. So his stuff is whoa,
He said that, didn't he? He
incredible.
said, what did he say to when he met Mozart's dad when like Mozart was 4 or 5? He said to, "I swear to you before God, as an honest man, your son is the best composer known to me by name."
Wow,
Yeah, and Haydn
goodness.
like kind of links, and he links Mozart, and he taught Beethoven. So he's that, like he says, that Papa. He sits in the middle as like the father there.
Mm,
His
mm.
music's
Yeah,
so beautiful. So did your dad like so Gerald Finzi and things like that? Would that be?
yeah. Finzi, yeah. I mean, a lot of the English tradition. I mean,
That's
I
what
love that too. I
I
love
do as
that
well.
early 20th century. I know you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
you compose similar to that, don't you?
I think so. I
Um,
think I probably do. I love that kind of sound, that the sound of the landscape.
yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think there's something about the early 20th century of in England, not just the music but the art as well, and the two are very much
Mm.
interweaving, and the poetry. So you have this amazing early 20th century English Renaissance of music, art, well, literature, poetry, etc. It's quite incredible. I don't know whether the wars shaped this. I think they must have had a massive effect. The First World War and the Second World War, especially.
Yeah. I think the
You think,
figure of Wagner as well, wasn't he? Sort of sits there. Wagner, this figure that the British composers had to kind of break away from, because you mentioned that
hmm,
your dad liked Wagner, but trying to find their own sound, if you like.
yeah, 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 very much so. I mean, Vard, like I say, I mean, he would listen, and I would listen. It was the operas, really, the Ring,
The ring cycle, right? Okay, yeah.
yeah, and that's all interconnected with, like Tolkien and where he came from, and I was really into that as a kid. So to me, it it's the landscape of my childhood. It
Mm.
has all these elements in it, and I just thought that was a normal landscape. And with obviously my dad was older than me and playing on music. My brother was 4 years older,
Oh,
so
right.
that both of those had a huge effect on me. So I was listening to what you might say mature music for my age
Yeah,
of my personal age.
intellectually quite stimulating music as well, quite challenging, high information music.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have my own stuff to listen to and friends and that, but I just, um, yeah, I liked it. I mean, of course, I liked the music of the 80s, and as I was growing up, in different types, and you find your own niche, don't you? Your own music, and I got into punk music even though it was a generation before me, pretty
Right.
much,
Okay. Yeah.
10 years before me. So, but I got into listen to that sort of high energy music as well, and
Mm.
which I really liked. Uh, but it a whole variety. I'm also into Talking Heads and
Yeah.
The Fall. I love The Fall when I was
Right.
sort of
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah.
14, 15, but Kraftwerk, fantastic.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. So when did you first start? When did you first pick up a guitar then? Start
Oh
playing.
yeah. Well, the guitar didn't come to me till I'd left school.
Did it not?
So it
Right.
was,
Well, I never knew that. Right. Okay.
yeah, it was about 18, 17. No, well, at 15, everyone has a guitar at 15. So
Yeah.
I had one then, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So it was really when I was 16, 17 when I started to really get into it.
Right. Okay.
Um, and that was more classical guitar.
Right.
That was I loved the other styles, but that was the one for me. But I remember as a nice little story. When I was about 9 or 10, my friend had a guitar, and I felt so attracted to it, and I thought I want to play this, and for some reason I didn't.
Right.
And yet I still have this picture of it in my mind. So it feels like it was a childhood symbol for me. It was really important, even though I didn't play it then.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, but yeah, I mean, I love music as a kid, but there wasn't much musical opportunities in a way
Yeah.
growing
Yeah.
up in the 80s in schools. It wasn't. I don't think it was as music wasn't as prominent as it is now. Perhaps in I don't know. I mean, yes and
Yeah.
no on that, isn't it? Really?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of sent out at school into the, my if you said what's your memories of music at school, it'd be the smell of the boys' changing rooms because I'd be sent out with a keyboard to sit on those benches, and because obviously I was a bit above what was being done in the music classes, so I sat there and it stunk of sweaty socks, and and that's my memory of music. My teacher Pam, who I keep in touch with, you just go over there, and you go play, then come back at the end, sort of thing. And she'd come and see me halfway through and say, "What are you working on?" That's kind of my memories.
Yeah,
There wasn't.
I guess
Yeah,
so. Yeah, I mean, we've made that was similar to me with art. So art, it was just a
yeah,
natural thing to draw.
yeah, of
So
course, yeah.
what you had there with the music, I had with the art. But music at secondary school, I remember that there was only a few people doing it, and you had to choose, which is I'm really annoyed about this
Yes.
actually. And, you had to choose between doing either music or PE. So either you go and play football, be a
Yeah.
lad, or you go and do music with about
Right.
five
Yeah.
other people. And that when I think back on that, that's appalling. That's appalling.
I might be wrong, but I think it might be still similar with sort of art, music, and drama. So if you wanted to do all three, I don't think that would be probably possible. I don't know. I might be wrong, but obviously, if you want to be a somebody in the West End, you need to do all three. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't-
think the arts are hugely, hugely underrated. I mean, obviously we're
absolutely,
very
and
biased.
I think it really
But
shapes you, even if you're not going on to be a musician or whatever. It just shapes you as a human. Um,
mm.
it keeps you in touch with that. So right, so what sort of things were you doing in your first kind of classical guitar lessons then? The early year or two. Was it classical pieces? Was it scales? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, all that sort of thing. I had some nice teachers. So I mean, I was, when you're 18, you've no idea what planet you're on. So it wasn't that my
Neither have
time
I
was
still.
wasted. So I mean, it was really when I was sort of 18 when I was getting my act together. So yeah, I just played pieces and bits of scales and things. Went to teachers, had private lessons,
Yeah,
and then I had gaps where I didn't play much, and then intense moments where I'd play a lot. So the classical guitar, which is a gorgeous instrument, demands a lot of work if you really want
mm,
to go into it. So there's a factor with time with these things, isn't there? So
mm.
if you're a musician and you're working on it, there's a lot of hours and you've got to put in. And if you become like a classical musician, if you specialize on an instrument, you've got to put hours and hours of work in every day, haven't you?
Yeah,
So
absolutely, yeah. And
so
the
I
fact you
mean,
started a little later, which I'm quite astonished when I hear you play then. I was going to guess that you started, I've never asked you, that you maybe started when you were 10 or 12 or so. So you must have put quite a bit of work in, Eddie, around that period.
yeah, I did. I mean, with the art and everything, it was just all that period was a blossoming of finding myself through
Mm.
art, music, etc. But yeah, I mean, it is quite a discipline with the guitar. So I never got to the point where I was um, doing it, playing it in any way professionally or anything like that. The guitar was always a sort of amateur thing until I was getting into my 20s and starting to write music and compose, and then it became more, later on when I started to perform concerts more on it.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
It
okay.
always been there, and I've done things in it with it and bits of concerts and that. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until my mid late 20s when I started to do that more because art was the prominent thing in my life, painting and drawing.
Yeah, paint and dry. And would you, if the teacher prescribed things, would you just go, would you think, right, I'll do that? This teacher knows what I need. We just go away and do the scales and things.
A variety, really. I mean,
Mm,
I had a few teachers. There's one that stuck out. He's called Fred. He was a
mm.
lovely man, and I'd just go to him private lessons, and he'd have like loads of music for me. So here's some music. Put it on the stand and play it. So he developed my sight reading.
Right, yeah,
So to a standard where I could just play the music.
yeah,
Obviously there's going to be bits of mistakes, but
yeah,
also
yeah,
he talked to me about music, not just playing pieces. It was about a feeling, and also about expression and also to improvise on within things
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So he was a lovely, lovely man and a lovely teacher,
Mm.
and he taught me more about music than playing the guitar, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I on the guitar, I never got to a standard of professional play. Never got to that because the amount of work to do on the technique
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it wasn't for me. And also the time, and also people who do that, I think they're brilliant to put that
Yeah.
time in. But I would write music instead and do my own composition. So that's what I did. I went more into that side.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, it's such a difficult instrument to play, isn't it? The classical guitar.
Yes, it is.
You know,
Yeah,
I've seen videos with classical guitarists with Brian May from Queen, and he's in awe. They're sat next to each, and he's just like, wow, it's just
it is difficult, and you have to put. It's like everything. You got to put the time and commitment in.
yeah,
That's the thing. But a beautiful instrument. And I did 2 albums on it
yeah,
on the guitar, and and I did a lot of concerts, and I
yeah.
just loved it.
And did you have sort of like so like there's two guitarists kind of stand out in the genre, like Bream, Julian Bream, and then John Williams. Were you kind of into those kind of players when you were in your twenties? Then were you like listening
Oh
to
yeah,
them or
yeah. And Segovia was the obvious
Segovia as
one.
well? Yeah,
Yeah, he was um, the god. So Julian Bream, John Williams, yeah, nice, but too too clean. I mean,
yeah,
don't get me wrong, absolutely wonderful, brilliant player.
mm-mm.
But you're either a Julian Bream or a John Williams.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
was a
I'm the
Bream.
Julian Bream. I'm
Yeah, I
the
was a
Bream.
Bream. Yeah,
Yeah, because his expression and his feeling and what he does with it is wonderful. So he's in that Segovia
yeah,
style. So there's lots of guitarists. I mean, I got so much guitar music on CDs, albums, hundreds,
yeah. Right.
obviously. So if you play an instrument, you collect the music of that
You do what you
instrument.
can see behind you. You collect the CDs, that you collect the albums. And I love classical guitar. I mean, I've got quite an extensive collection myself. And I
Mm.
particularly with Bream, I found what love was when he would commission all these British composers, wouldn't he? He would really work
Yeah,
hard at trying to get like Walton with the five bagatelles. There's
and
other
Britain as well. He
yeah,
nagged Britain, didn't he, to
yeah.
till he finally gave in.
And then there's that awfully difficult piece. I mean, Michael Tippett, the blue guitar. I think it's really super difficult. But
I
like,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean the classical guitar. I mean, I loved it. To be honest, in the last few years, I've moved away from it because, and now when
Oh,
I
look,
look back at,
there's a picture behind gives us a little clue, I think, if you move your head.
oh yeah, the lute,
To the
yeah.
lute.
So I play the lute now, the Renaissance lute. So with the classical guitar, I loved it, and I think it's still beautiful. But to me personally, this is only on the personal thing. I'm not saying for everyone, but to me, the lute has eclipsed it. In
Yeah,
fact, it's more than eclipsed it. Um, it's just a reverie finding the lute,
yeah,
and I when I listen to classical guitar now, I mean, it's still beautiful now, but I don't know. I don't think it's in the same league as the lute,
yeah. So you were
which
always
is
looking for the
slightly
lute.
it's slightly controversial thing to say, perhaps that, but I think the guitar is beautiful. The classical guitar is like the roots of a tree, whereas the lute is the branches to
Right,
me.
okay, I like that. Wasn't the
Yeah,
appointment there a video on the internet of like, didn't Bream show, was it was it Stravinsky the lute? I don't know, I might be mistaken. Can't remember.
yeah. There is, yeah,
Not sure if he was
and
too
he
impressed. I don't
well,
know.
Bream played the lute, obviously, but obviously he played a lute that was um, new in a sense. It had been remade, and it was remade to fit his classical guitar playing style.
Right, okay,
So
yeah.
Bream doesn't really play it
Not a
in a
lute play,
lute
yeah.
way,
Mm. So it's a
but
skill in
there's
itself.
different.
It's a skill in itself, surely.
Oh yeah, I mean the lute. There's different types of lute playing. I mean, if we could talk. I could talk this about 200 hours. So just be prepared. There's different types. So with a classical guitar, if you can see my hand,
Yeah,
the classical guitar is like that with
yeah,
your hand when you're playing. So you got your fingers, you
yeah,
got your thumb. with a lute. It's like that.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
then you got that. But that's for the early Renaissance lute. Gradually, through the 1500s and certainly into the 1600s, the hand started to do this.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Especially when you got into like the Baroque lute. So lutes again, it's like saying I play the guitar, and then you say what type of guitar. The lute is exactly the same. I play the lute. And you say what type of lute.
Yeah.
So you could say I play the guitar, and there's a massive difference between the classical guitar and the electric guitar,
Yeah. And the
and
acoustic or whatever. Yeah. Mm.
yeah, and that's the same with the lute.
Right. Okay.
Different types of lute. So it depends when you're playing the music of.
Yeah.
So
Right. Okay.
it's really fascinating. But yeah, so the lute, Bream really brought the lute back um into popular
Yeah.
sort of people seeing the lute again. So up until then, the lute had died out really, and there was
Mm.
bits of things, but so lute making people, the luthiers who were making the lutes really began around the time of Bream when he was
Mm.
playing. He sort of revolutionized the lute making again.
Yeah.
So it really is a rebirth. The Renaissance lute, as its name is, the Renaissance rebirth. The lute has had a rebirth in the 20th
Yeah.
century.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. I want to ask you a slightly. So, if you were picking symphonies or orchestral music over the recent years, is there certain symphonies you love that you listen when you're painting, or have you got certain composers you're like, right, I'm going to put on this or that? And if you think back, is you're like, yeah, I always go to that piece. I listen to that piece a lot in the symphonic tradition. First of all, if we talk about that.
Yeah. Well, there's a variety. I guess I go through phases like everyone else does with music.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say the obvious thing, but I have to say the obvious thing. I do love listening to Paul Williams now and again.
Yeah.
I
Me
don't. You,
too.
you can't get away from him. I mean, but his music's gorgeous. So yeah, Finzi, of course. The English stuff.
Mm.
Sibelius.
Well, they're
That's
just
always
beautiful out of the symphonies. So.
yeah. I haven't been listening to many I almost said sympathies then symphonies recently. So I guess I often I prefer I like choral music, and I love the string quartet. So
So
the
if you're
symphony.
listening, do you have choral composers you like then that you like to listen to? Obviously, there's some
Yeah,
lovely stuff from Finzi, of course, in the choral tradition, but
yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I mean, talking the English tradition, the Macmillan,
yeah, James Macmillan, yeah,
yeah, his stuff is wow. It's really
yeah,
soul uplifting. It's incredible, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, I was quite when I was young, I was really into his mass. It's a masterpiece, the mass that he wrote.
Mm.
But then if people aren't familiar, there's these choral works like a new song, and then there's all these other big choral works that he took on as well, and the symphonies as well. They're stunning. The fifth and the sixth, they just
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I listened to the Strathclyde.
Oh, the
Um,
Strathclyde, the motets. Yeah, yeah, right. Okay.
so incredible. So I like that sort of sacred polyphony. Again, it's connected, with the lute. No, sorry, keep going back to lute.
Mm.
Told you,
So it's that you
because
did
the
warn me.
well, the polyphony music. That's what the lute was about. The lute was Josquin de Prey, etc., and things like that. He
Yeah, yeah.
took his music, so that was different voices, 4 or 5 voices, and what they would do on the lute, they would put each voice on the lute. So you would have different voices on the lute playing. So that's where it
Right, yeah.
comes from a lot of the music.
And Matt
Uh,
Millen's got a sort of a defined. You can hear his style. The embellishments, the ornament, these ornamentations that he would use. In
yeah,
fact,
yeah.
once got him to
Yeah.
come to the music college. I used to teach at to do a. He did like a workshop with the kids, and then we took him for lunch. And it's funny because everybody's calling him Jimmy, and I was like, I've always called him James, in my mind. And I remember he sort of broke out into song over lunch, and it was beautiful, like singing a little bit of some of his music.
Wow.
Wonderful. So I've always been a fan, and I used to play the first piano sonata of his, which is a quite a tricky, dense thing. But I used to love playing that.
He's very underrated, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he
I
does.
mean, that's the thing about composers, aren't they? That do you find that they're not getting enough
Maybe not the
airplay?
yeah, yeah, and maybe not, I mean he does have commissions, doesn't he? And like the 16 will sing a lot of his choral
Yeah.
works. I just think it's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. So let's move from that slightly to I know that you love jazz as well. So
Mm.
if you're listening to jazz, what's your go-to listens? What mood are you in at the moment?
Oh goodness me! Again, I haven't listened to much jazz recently. Um,
I know you would say like we would have messages about Bill Evans, for example.
yeah, yeah, Bill Evans. Yeah, I love that. I mean, um, it's just it's magical play. It's wonderful,
Yeah,
isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
and we've talked about him quite a bit, haven't we?
yeah,
And I know you're a big fan of Bill Evans, aren't you? I mean,
absolutely, yeah. Any bootleg that comes out, like because his
do
playing's
you?
always so solid, whatever the bootleg is, whatever night
Yeah.
it is, it's always on. And he had such a tortured life with his addiction to drugs. It's just
Yeah.
amazing that he was able to sort of put that to one side and play so well.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say like a bootleg, so that I guess that's like his rough. They're just improvising or something. Is that for you more insightful to hear that than is more the finished albums?
I think so, and there's just so many. I've got so many of them down here. They're just coming out. These kind of, recorded in somewhere in Norway, for example, but recorded well for radio, and then somebody just kept hold of the tapes.
Mm.
And these
Yeah.
guys at these labels have to chase the tapes. They have to confirm if it's Bill Evans, which is pretty obvious when you listen to it. There's only Bill. And then it's
Mhm.
like they release it. And then some of them audio quality is quite inferior, but it's not really about that. It's really interesting to hear. So in answer to your question, absolutely. It's lovely to hear him playing a song because Bill had a group of like 15 songs towards the end of his life, 20 songs that he would always play. So to hear the different ways that he would play those is just for me as a gift. I don't know how he'd have felt about it. I don't know how I'd feel about it.
Mm.
I've heard Pat
So-
Metheny say it's great to go on YouTube and see one of the worst gigs I've ever had up there for me to watch. But I don't know how he would feel about it. And I know you
but
like Pat Metheny as well.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, all the guitar. What's he called? What's he called? The amazing guitarist.
Oh, Julian Lage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, he now musically is wonderful, but to watch him, so I see, so I'm quite visual. Obviously being a painter,
Yeah.
so when I see him, it's like a willow. It's like something in the wind, and his whole body is musical.
Oh, yeah. I saw him live just a couple of months ago in Leeds to do a
Wow.
solo concert. And it was strange because it was at like a rock club. So it was quite bizarre. It was at the
Right.
Brudenell Club in Leeds. It's quite an unusual venue, but it was absolutely packed. And like you said, the movement, the way he plays. And my
Mm.
friend, I was sat next to two of my friends who are very fine guitarists in this country, really great jazz players. And after it finished, one of them leaned into me and he said, I just need to find that other string he seems to have that I don't have.
Fabulous. That's a good saying. That, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with music, when you see someone play, the this is how, again, my personal opinion, but if I see someone play and they're not in the music, they're just playing. It could be technically great, or
Mm,
to me, I'm turned off. I don't mean to, but I just if they're not imbuing the music, it can be okay, but it's just not there. I would rather watch someone who really imbues the music and does incredible things, but may not be the best technical player. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's the spirit that comes out. And they might hit the odd thing or the odd scratch or whatever. It doesn't matter really. It's the musicality of it, which is the soul pouring forth through what they're doing. I mean,
Lovely. Uh,
he is
he,
like the
he takes
ultimate.
risks. He takes risks.
Yeah,
Like I try to do as well. He just goes for it, and you can see it on his face. You hear him go, oh, be like, whoa,
yeah.
I got myself there, but that were a little bit awkward, but I managed to get there or whatever. And I love that. I love because it's a two-way thing with the audience. Then you see they appreciate that he went for something that he'd never tried before.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the incredible thing about jazz. I still think it's alchemy,
Mm, mm,
to me, because and I'm going to go back to loot. Very briefly,
Well, it's
but
good. We're closing out, so let's close with Luke.
okay. Well, we're talking about the alchemy and we're talking about jazz. So let's
Mm,
go back and let's wrap it all up into a Morbius loop,
mm,
because the lute music, a lot of it was about improvisation, and also the sort of medieval things, music. So you would
mm,
improvise around things, and you would change things, and you were encouraged to do that. And there's a saying, a written statement from about 1500s. I forget who it's by, but it was saying that the lute is beautiful, but the voice is, like the heavenly voice. So you must try and get as close as you can to the voice through expression, through improvisation, through bringing out certain passages with that passion. And I just
mm.
thought, well, that's great. So that's basically saying, the soul, isn't it? The music is about expressing the soul.
Mm.
Not about some technical perfect thing or whatever. It's about this deep expression.
Yeah.
So
It's almost like I always think of it with the great pianist Keith Jarrett, it can be it could be difficult, it could be challenging, but it's almost when he played, his ego left almost, and he would
mm,
play from the divine, from the soul, kind of
yeah, I think
expressed it. Yeah.
from the divine, I like that. It is. It's coming through.
Yeah.
So even if I play some music on the lute, and I'm reading music, I can sense it. And or if I just the lute is lovely to improvise on. If I just improvise and play on the lute, it's the
Yeah.
same thing. And of course, you've been the master of
Good
improvisation.
at that.
But you have all the technical things, you have all the years of practice and experience, etc. But still, there's that. I guess there's that voice, that feeling, that's something that we cannot put our hand on or fingertip on, that comes through you. And
Yeah, it's like going on
so,
a path and you just in a forest and you think, how did we get here? You just don't know, and that's what's beautiful about it.
mm,
Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you about music, Eddie.
yeah,
We could talk all day.
yeah, that's the problem. So maybe we should.
Wrap
We can
up.
always do some more, can't we?
Yeah, we could do
Excellent.
some more. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Paul.